quickly go. Just search for these terms. You might catch an interview with me and this fella.
Oh, perfect. Well, hey, here we are live. My name is Michael Emery, and I'm with the legendary Troubadour, Billy Franks. How about that intro?
I'll take both. I'll take both. I've waited a long time for the word legendary. There's one other word which I won't mention today that I'm still waiting on. When I get that, I think that's when it's time for me to get out the game.
Nice. Well, my viewers probably know a little bit about me. My background's in personal development.
Right.
I focus on hypnosis, NLP, transpersonal psychology, and I've done some work with guided imagery, visualization, and also a degree of my work has been focusing lately upon men's personal development and a rite of passage for men. And Billy, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started? You've been a performing musician for a number of years, I believe. You've definitely been doing your work.
I've never done anything else. I was fortunate enough to find what I wanted to do with my life at a very young age. I was only 14, and I saw somebody else singing and playing the guitar. And I just thought, I had this when you have that very clear moment, I just thought, I could do that. But I also thought, I could do it better than him. So, and I was actually in a play, and I got paid. I bought myself a guitar. And the short story is, I instead of learning from a book how to play the guitar, I just thought I'll buy a book of songwriters because I knew I wanted to write songs. So I got the Beatles Complete book, which had every Beatles song in it, and then learned them on the guitar. So while I was learning guitar, I was also learning how to structure a song.
Oh, nice. And is that the book that had all the tablature and?
Yeah, it was called The Beatles Complete. I can see it now with a little kind of psychedelic cover. But it literally had every song in alphabetical order. I think I did them in alphabetical order too. I just went, unless they were very difficult, and I was like, I'll come back to that one. But I learned them all, and as I was going through, I saw structural ideas that I liked, and I'd go, wow, I see what they did there. There's a key change or a minor chord where you expect a major chord, and wow, that's nice. Make a note. So when I turned my hand to songwriting, I already had some intuitive things I picked up from the very best.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah. So I've been doing it all my life. I've never worked in any other field. I've never had another job. It's an interesting thing, and this is something you would recognise, that I've been doing it so long now, songwriting, that it's no longer a sort of go-to thing. It's a state of mind.
It certainly is. It certainly is. I totally resonate with that expression. So what I wanted to cover today is, Billy and I have had some conversations over the past week or so, and is the more that we've talked, or back and forth written conversations, the more it seems like we're on the same path. We're just coming at it from different angles, and it's a path of personal development, self-awareness, and also being vulnerable and going out, using an artistic expression as a form of searching our own inner depths, I guess is the best way I could put it. And so what I really wanted to share with people that are watching this or listening to this right now is do a little bit of modeling, perhaps from an NLP perspective, on Billy's process for artistic expression, and just tie in some of the elements of creative visualization and some insights perhaps that other artists, maybe they're performing musicians, maybe they're aspiring musicians, artists of any kind of type. I believe that, personally, I'm an artist in my own way. I won't claim that I'm a musician, but I'm an artist.
Can I just clarify? I don't claim to be a musician either.
Well, I
only claim to be a songwriter. That's quite slightly different.
I think that's the honest truth with that. It's really looking at the most important elements of what is it that you're trying to convey. And I think within your work and my work, I spent this entire morning listening to Billy's music, and I encourage everybody to go to his Facebook page, Twitter, to his website, download his music, go to Amazon. It's on Amazon, right? And iTunes would be my guess.
Some of it's on iTunes, some of it's on Amazon. But generally, if you go to my own website, which is billyfranks.com, there's a pathway to everything from there.
Okay.
That's your first thought.
Go get the music. I mean, it's there's some just some beautiful melodic stuff, and I've got to say you've got a great voice. Your singing voice. If I could sing, I'd want to sing like you. So
Really?
there's oh man, you got that great voice. You can get in there. It's got some grit to it, and you've really got some velocity with your ability to just go in there and it's very moving, I guess is the best way I can put it. It's like it gets your attention and it's pleasant to listen to, and so it's a very unique voice. And
I have a novelist friend who calls it mellifluous, which is a word I've never heard before, but apparently it means it's pleasing on the ear.
Yeah, so, yeah, it certainly is.
If you are a singer, it takes a hell of a long time to ever feel that way yourself, because if you leave your voicemail thing and then you play it back and you kind of go, oh, that doesn't sound like me. When you sing, it's that tenfold. You kind of sing and then you play it back to yourself and go, wow, I thought it sounded so much better than that. Because the sound of the voice coming back is sometimes odd even for me.
Yeah,
I'm glad you like it.
No, I definitely understand, that whole process of going through the recording studio, hearing your voice, thinking it sounds one way in your head, and then hearing yourself live, and you're like going,
of course.
Huh.
Yeah.
I got some stuff I can work on. So,
well, no, but I'm not just mutual backslapping here, but the sound of your voice is perfect. And we'll cut to it later, but I was going to ask you maybe if you might do a voiceover for something I'm recording. We'll come back.
Sure, I'd love to. I think that'd be a lot of fun. I think it'd be great. Yeah. So, well, what I'm curious to know is how did you get started? And, you shared a little bit about how you started playing guitar, started songwriting, but there's a massive leap between playing in your bedroom and then playing in front of an audience. And I think that is that massive jump that most aspiring musicians want to take, and it also involves a lot of fear and the possibility or almost the certainty that you're going to fail. And I think that's one of the major themes in God, it's been the major theme in my life, but also the major theme in my work is how do you master failure? And that sounds perhaps funny, but regardless of what you want to do, if you want to excel in it, if you want to be good at it, you're most likely going to fail to begin with. And you can look at the greats in any field, and they might be good now or great. They might be masters, but there was that point where they were failures. I don't believe that very many of them, you could look at sports, you could look at business, you could look at artistic expression. I don't think that any of them, for the most part, had an easy ride.
No. You're bound to fail, particularly in the early stages. It goes with the job. But I always think as long as it's your failure, as long as all my success and all my failures are mine. So therefore, I don't mind. If I'd, say, taken somebody else's advice and taken a different route, I've always stuck to my own route, my own path. And so if I fail or succeed, it's my failure. I own it. It's my success. I own it. So I'm happy with that. I'd be less happy if I failed and someone else had given me advice that I'd followed. So if you do it your own way, at least you can learn to live with the failure because it was your choice. And so you'll learn from it and do it better next time. Whereas if you've got somebody else to kind of go, if I hadn't listened to that fellow, maybe it would have gone, you could make the same mistake over and over again,
Do you remember your first live performance? And it may have been for, a small group. What happened?
It was a youth club. I was still in my mid-teens, and it's interesting because I tell this story when people ask me if I get nervous, because we went to the youth club and the Beatles film Help was playing, and I was a big fan. And we were going to play afterwards. Now, usually I would sit there enthralled by the movie because it was my favourite group. I couldn't wait for it to finish. I was like, can we fast forward so I can get up and play? So I didn't have that nervous thing. Part of me's always had this thing like, I don't know, like, that's my place,
That's interesting. So that's kind of your mental perception when you're going to perform. It's almost like the ownership of this is my place. Everybody's here to watch me or to participate with what I'm creating for them. I'm in the chair, and for the next, when I sit down, because now I only play really solo, just me, my guitar, my songs, and I tell stories and stuff.
But the minute I sit in the chair for the next 2 or so hours, the world's exactly how I want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go from there.
That's one of the themes that I've been picking up on a lot lately, and there are obviously other people out there that have done a great deal of work around this concept of individualism. I know that, for example, the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island, G. Edward Griffin, he talks a lot about individualism versus collectivism. And I think that globally, we're seeing the trends towards collectivism. You know, we are one, you know, and kind of a lot of the PC talk that's out there. And I think that to a certain degree, there are some positives to that, but there's also a great deal of limiting pressure or opposition, I guess, to the individual. And you can look at any theme, you know, it might be a film or music or, you know, even storytelling or mythology, but they always revolve around individuals that do things.
Yes.
And you can look at society and you can see that society is comprised of individuals, and you can actually identify the individuals, but you can't point to the group or the collective. It doesn't exist. It's not it's a concept. It's an intangible. But there are so many people that can be sacrificed to the group, and I think that, or for the betterment of the group. And I think that one of the themes that makes people very easy to control, and this is kind of the process of my work, or my whole background is coming out of a religious background, and that kind of mind control where you see groups being controlled by a belief system that you know, promises certain elements, and the reality of it is that nobody has any better answers than you or I. Everybody else is guessing just like us. They have no objective, verifiable data, and so I think as an individual, you're better off just choosing and going, this is my path. I can live with integrity and I can pursue it, because at least if it goes wrong, I'm the only one that can be blamed.
Yes.
And what I like about, you know, tying this back into what you said about, you know, that's my chair, that's where I'm going. I think for anybody that's an aspiring artist, performer, musician, business person, it doesn't really matter what it is, but you are the individual. You are the one that has to lead. And I believe in horizontal collectivism. Like if you and your neighbors want to get together and build a house, that's great. If you and your neighbors want to get together and improve your neighborhood, perfect, do it. But I don't believe in the vertical hierarchy of, you know, we've got great leaders and they tell us, the group, what to do. BS. I call BS on that.
I was listen. You're spelling out particularly the last 25 years of songwriting for me has been trying to address that very topic. My first solo album, in fact, I was in a band for a while called the Faith Brothers in the 80s that were somewhat popular, which gave me a footing, you know. But my very first solo album was called Mass, and it was about that very idea that, like, and it started with 2 songs. One was called Age, which was about generational belongings, if you like, you know, belonging to a certain time or place. And Mass was about the last step. They were like bookends, and the final song was called Mass, and it was about belonging to a group, whether it be political, religious, or anything, you know. And that we shouldn't, because the basic premise for me was that the minute you belong to a faction or a fraction, you're excluding yourself from belonging to the whole thing.
Absolutely.
You're out. You've cut everything else out.
Yeah. And it also makes it very easy for you to be controlled. You know, if you're part of this clique or niche or whatever else. I also think
you no longer have a mind of your own.
No, it's groupthink. You know, it's
and
to use the Orwellian term.
Yeah, and I do believe that deep down we do have a moral code that's inbuilt, and I think most people would rather be good. I think we desire to be good. It's only the minute you let go of that and hand it over to somebody else, they have the power to manipulate that. And tell you how to be good. And before you know where you are, you're not thinking for yourself, and when you're not thinking for yourself, someone's going to tell you how to do it.
Certainly, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, you meet the basic needs, and then you get ever expanding levels beyond that
Right.
of personal development or
Yeah.
actualization.
Yeah.
And I think that's really one of the most important things that I believe personally that we can pursue or aspire to in our lifetimes. Um, I want to go back to the concept of collectivism versus
Yeah.
individualism, and within that, the whole purpose of individualism, I believe, is the fulfillment of the creative drive, the creative process,
Right.
and it's all about expression. We all do it differently.
Yeah.
The scientist working in a lab to that's charting the genome or
Yeah.
doing something else, that is just as much a creative process as an engineer who's building something, as Billy Franks sitting in the studio composing his next song, as
I, I am in the studio right now. This is it.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So but it's that whole process of, you've got this concept, it's charted, you might have fragments of it, or it could be perfectly clear in your mind, but you've got to get it out of your body, you've got to get it out in some way, and it has to go onto paper, it has to be recorded digitally, it has to be some way duplicated and made sense of, so that other people can actually experience it. And
there's a very, very refined way to do that, I've found, and that is at the moment of conception, if you like, the minute you have the idea. What ties all these things together? You said scientists and biologists, whatever field. You're right, it is creative because it takes a leap of imagination first. Right? And that's the common thread, I think, is that you're using your imagination to imagine what if. Right? But I always think that at the moment of that conception of that idea, there's a little nugget there that you always go back and refer to. Everything, that's the touchstone for me. I go, does it fit that? Does it work around that? Does it latch onto that? Is it connected still to that? If it's not, then I discard it. Whether it be, shall I have a banjo on this song? If I play a banjo and it doesn't, that little nugget, as I call it, if it doesn't connect to that or doesn't reverberate from that, then the banjo's out.
So for you, would the nugget be almost the essence of the song, or is it your essence?
No, it's the essence of the song. It's the essence of whatever's coming.
Okay. So it's kind of like the central hub, and everything else attaches to that, and it either benefits it or it takes away from it. It's either a positive addition or it's a distraction or a negative reduction of the quality.
Yes, and if it's a positive, I keep it, and if it's negative, I don't. And I think as long as you keep going back to, is this what it wanted? Is this what it's calling for? As long as you keep going back and making sure, you can't possibly go wrong. You can't go wrong. It will still, whether anybody else likes it, is immaterial. As long as you're true to it, so that it becomes fully fledged.
I would say that I do that with program development, or even the development of visual map.
I don't know if you can hear me, but it all jumped around a bit there. You've frozen, and I heard two words sort of boing, boing, and that was it.
Using the Sharpie pens, I'm able to go out there and draw mental maps, and sometimes I'll do it digitally using software like Lucidchart or something.
Right.
And we all have a unique process of making mental maps, which is essentially what I would say this is. For you, is it more of an auditory sort of experience, or what is your creative process for developing a song? Like, for example, it might be different in every instance. The last song that you wrote or have been working on, how is that process happening for you? Do you as I consider the possibilities, it could be you hear the music, or do you think in terms of situations, context, and then you start to put music to that, like mental movies or sceneries, or is it something that's kinesthetic for you?
It's evolved for me in that it used to be, I've got some ideas, that I've made notes of or I've thought of, and maybe I should pick up the guitar or sit at the piano or a notebook and see how that what I could do with that. Whereas for the last few years, it's really, instead of being a something I go to, it's a state of mind which I'm constantly in, which means I could be at any given time, we could be sitting here now and you could say something or something would occur to me and I would immediately know that that was was material for a song. I would know instinctively, and then almost without me having to do very little, it would. And here's the weirdest thing, is that most people always ask songwriters, what comes first, words or music? It's no longer even that for me. They're already married somewhere in the back of my head. they pop up together and go, it's a couple, and it's done. It's very strange for me to observe and feel after, but it's been so long. It's been 40 years. So it shouldn't be a surprise. So there isn't particular, it's random in terms of when it's likely to occur, and it's very instinctive when it does, and very immediate. And I no longer need to be near an instrument or a notebook in order to see it through. I can actually go through the melody and the lyric and start to work it out, whatever I'm doing.
Sure.
And then the next time I'm at an instrument, I'll try and work out what my head's constructed, and I'll go, wow, there's some great chords in there. I had no idea.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things where you said something there, like it shouldn't be a surprise. After X number of years, it should be something that happens naturally. And the biggest element that I think for most people is that it is a surprise. And I remember that whole process of awakening, as Ram Dass might call it, where you start to realize and try to take an objective third-person perspective at your life, as much as possible, and be the observer and just go, wow, I'm experiencing this, and this. Or when I step back and I analyze my whole process, it has a series of equations, and that's one of the real beauties that really opened my eyes. Gosh, back early 2000, 2001, 2002 was when I was first exposed to NLP, and all of a sudden there's this map of the creation of a paradigm. And for me, these were words that I had never heard of before. It's like, what's a paradigm? It's like, I thought that my reality was a shared reality. I thought the way that I experienced music or sounds or colors or sensations was the same as everybody else. But the more I started to study this, and it was that process of awakening in my early 20s, where all of a sudden I realized that when I use a word, for example, I could say waterfall, the mental imagery that goes through my mind is entirely different from the mental imagery that goes through someone else's mind. And I think that that's the major major benefit, and also the catch-22, the thing that we need to be aware of in this day and age, especially in this digital era, where we're finding that advertising has grown to the point where advertisers are trying to collapse their branding or their content with an associated phrase or word, or even a logo. I mean, you could look at a company's logo and you instantaneously have associations with that. I mean, that is powerful. So, it could be a Mercedes-Benz emblem. It could be, Pepsi-Cola.
I was thinking of the Nike tick. I mean, that's
the Nike,
Everyone knows that tick.
And this is nothing new, and this is where my work has come from. Coming out of a religious background, these icons are charged energetically, and there's Richard Dawkins' work on memes. These concepts that are using human beings to actually transport themselves instead of the other way around, where we think that human beings transport concepts. No, it's actually reversed. I think it's really fascinating. You could take a religious icon, like a cross, for example, and that is so heavily charged with all kinds of associations, positive and negative, and I don't think that scientifically we can measure it quite yet, but there are a fair number of occultists or people that practice other spiritual belief systems that believe that those icons are actually charged with some sort of energy. And I'd say the same thing. It's like you look at the Nike symbol and it's definitely charged. So.
But it's you know, to reiterate what you said, it's charged differently for everybody that views.
Yeah.
It's charged but the charge that they get is, like you say, and now I'm starting to understand when you said about paradigm, because the charge everybody gets from an icon or a symbol like that will be relevant only to them.
Yep.
It's their charge, if you like. It's they're the ones who are making what they can of it or will of it.
Exactly.
I wanted to ask you a couple of questions, because two things you touched on that not only interest me as a person, but also because my work touches upon them. One is, you've said now twice that you come from a religious background, which means there must have been a transition for you to come out of that into what you're doing now. Now I wonder how difficult that was, because I know when I wrote a piece that tried to free myself from that whole, I didn't particularly have a religious background, but I know that it had a grip on me in some way, and I wanted to shed it. And so I went through a period of that, and I found it very difficult. And that was a shock, because I didn't expect it to be difficult. So I would like to know how you dealt with that, and we can compare notes maybe. And also, there's a piece of yours that I really just. There was two pieces that I know of yours. One is The Call, and one is Start Your Day Right. There are two things in there that I found just so inspirational, which was what compelled me to get in touch with you in the first place, you know. But particularly The Call, because it seems such a brave thing to do, and to issue a call like that, you're really asking, you know, are you up for such a thing? And when I listened to it, I was like, dude, I'm there, you know. But even so, I got a little, you know, it's like, wow, if you're going to take that first step, you better be prepared, because it's not. I said this in one of my emails to you, you know, it's a lonely road, it's a long walk, and it's difficult.
Mm-hmm. And to paraphrase one of my favorite authors, Joseph Campbell, you know, you're not the only one. You know, the heroes of all time have gone before you.
Yeah.
You know, the labyrinth is it's already charted, and the only thing that we needed to do is pick up where they left off. And I think that for me, that is the biggest motivation. Some people can look at life. You know, I know people quite well that are able to look at life and say there is no meaning.
Yeah.
And you know, if you look at it in terms of the full spectrum, there's those that say life has no meaning. We're just here, you know, we're going to die, and that's the only guarantee. There are others that say, well, life has this absolute meaning, and you've got this process that you have to do or go through in order to, you know, either continue living in some sort of afterlife, which would be a kind of a religious perspective, or, you know, some variation of that.
Yeah.
I look at it, it's more of a gray perspective, and I find anymore it's very difficult to have a black and white perspective on much of anything. I believe that there are some capital truths. I think that we see that within universal laws, but beyond that, you know, we really live in a gray world, and I think that we have the flexibility of assigning meaning to our experiences. And if I choose to have a life that, or choose to pursue a life with meaning, as I define those meanings as, you know, I see to be congruent with my purpose, my identity, and the legacy that I want to leave behind me, that is an entirely different horizon or outlook than the person who says, well, life has no meaning, whatever happens is going to happen, and I'll figure out a way to sort through it, and then I'll die. Okay, that's cool, that's great. If that works for you, that's fine. But as long as I'm free to choose that, and you know, I could go as far as looking at it from a religious or spiritual perspective, to say that if there's a higher intelligence, you know, and this is like a massive topic, a rabbit hole to go down, you know, anymore. But to look at that and go, if there's some sort of divine intelligence that gave me the capacity to do some degree of critical thinking, then if I ask questions that might be blasphemous according to the majority of, you know, certain religious belief systems out there, then why do I have that capacity to think?
Yeah, there you go.
You know, it's just like, what the hell? So let's go back to your first question. The religious background. I was baptized as an infant, obviously against my will, um, as a Catholic. I had no say in that, and that goes into a whole string of different conversations. My parents later became Protestant, and they went through a series of going to Baptist churches, then to churches that became more and more charismatic and ultimately evangelical. And
with you in tow.
What's that?
With you in tow, they taking?
Oh yeah. I mean, there was pardon my French, but there was a bunch of crazy shit that I got to see. And I logged the time. By the time I turned 18 years old, I think I had most likely experienced at least 10 or 12,000 hours in a church. There was church 7 days a week if you needed a reason to go. And I can't remember the stand-up. I can't remember the stand-up comedian. No. I can't remember the stand-up comedian, but he was like the part of the Kings of Comedy, and he was telling his routine, and he's like, there was Sunday night church, for to start the week off. There was Monday morning prayer meeting. There was Tuesday night missionary. There was Wednesday night youth group. There was Thursday night church activities, Saturday night prayer, and then Sunday morning church service. He's like, eventually it just got to the point where I was like, Mom, can't I just go to hell? It'd be easier. And I look back at that, and I'm just like going, my God, there are so many different hours being logged there, and it really ties into that 10,000 hours to mastery concept. And I'm not saying I mastered anything there, except for that church dynamic, and the moment that there was that crack in the shell. And for me, it happened. I changed my major a bunch of different times. I started out, my 18 years old. I started out pre-med, and I wanted to help people. I wanted to be some sort of professional, and I wanted to make money. Right? I mean, there's some like really general targets there.
Yeah.
Until about my second month in Chemistry 101, and I was just failing bad. I mean, I couldn't get it. And so my advisor, who also happened to be my chemistry teacher at this private university I was going to, he said, look, if you're struggling this much in Chemistry 101, perhaps pre-med isn't the thing for you. I said, okay, what can I do? And I thought about it for a while and thought, what do I like? What inspires me? Archaeology. What? Indiana Jones, right? I want to be Indiana Jones, and I'd already had, from an early age, I had an affinity for Latin America, and there's a lot of interest in the different regions in Latin America and some of the prehistory there, and so I started out, studying archaeology and anthropology. Did that for about 2 years, and with an emphasis on Latin America, and I got to the point where I was starting to get some fairly decent feedback from my professor, who had been on several archaeological excavations in Mexico, and he sounded like he was enamored with the whole idea. I think he was caught up in that whole process of being a professor and knowledgeable, and the accolades and stuff that go with that. But he told me one time, he said, I remember being on a dig in Mexico, and the guys that were digging the holes in the ground were being paid more money than I was.
Wow.
And I remember looking at this guy, and I think that we all make judgments, right? It's part of life, it's part of surviving. And I looked at this guy, and from what I could deduce, he was middle-aged, probably a heavy drinker. I think he was single, and his clothing, he'd wear these tweed suits that had to be at least 30. Yeah, the suits had to be like 30 years old, and
did they have little patches on the elbow?
Yep. And he drove this little green Mercedes that I think it was like, 1968, 72 Mercedes. And as a 20-year-old kid, I remember thinking about that going, that's not necessarily, the Indiana Jones kind of mental imagery I had. And so I was lost there for a bit, but I had this, for example, I had this realization again today for, no matter how many, it doesn't matter how many times I have it, it's always that aha breakthrough kind of moment.
Yeah.
The universe always gives you what you need. Now,
Right.
you can call BS on that. You can say, oh, that you're just making that up, whatever.
Right.
Sure, but if you accept that perspective or that paradigm, then it changes your frame for every experience that you're going to have.
Yeah.
And what I found is that my life has provided these sequential steps of a lot of random information that over time I found it easier and easier to draw the lines and connect and synthesize these different areas. And so to go back into that, I found myself once again in limbo, deciding that, well, maybe archaeology and 12 years of study to become a PhD to go, work on these digs and to really never have a financial upside unless I became an author or I found something really big. To offset that with the tremendous amount of debt that you'd have to accrue to go study for all that time. How does that make sense? It just doesn't make sense. And are you familiar with Graham Hancock?
Nope.
He's a brilliant author from the UK. He wrote Fingerprints of the Gods, and one of the life-changing books that I read in my earlier 20s. And one of the things that he's kind of come towards archaeology from the perspective of somebody that's outside of that discipline. So he can be a lot more open-minded because he's not, towing the line for any sort of academic groups or universities, and he's free to speak his mind. But he's done a lot of fascinating independent research, and highly recommend his book, Fingerprints of the Gods. Just some mind-blowing global research that he's done there on prehistory.
Wow, I'll take it.
Yeah, definitely recommend. I try to recommend that book to as many people as possible. But so I came out of this study of archaeology, and the major thing that it created in my mind was that Christianity has this perspective of a world that's give or take 6,000 years old, that people were living like savages before, in earlier times, and it wasn't until this great uniting force of Christianity that came along and that evolved out of Judaism, that evolved out of Catholicism, that has set the world straight and righted all the wrongs, blah blah blah. So I had this brainwashed kind of mentality in my teenage years that the Christians were the ones that were going to save the world. And the more that I studied prehistory and saw the degree of technological advancement, the degree of awareness of things that were outside of the Earth, for example, in terms of like astronomy, the awareness of the Incans and Mayans, mathematics, these signs of high civilization that preceded the time and date of the Christianity's map of the world. And so for me that started to give me some questions, planted the seeds of doubt in my mind. Am I being told the whole truth here? And I, coming out of that program, I don't mean to make this a long story, but I think there's some interesting, some invaluable experiences in here. I ended up going to a seminary for a year because I had some friends, and that's where they were going. And the main upside for that whole decision was I wanted to play football, and this seminary had a team, and we'd travel around. We'd play different universities, and we went to Canada and played some league games, and I was having a lot of fun doing that. But on the other hand, I was having this spiritual awakening in a religious environment and I was getting to read a lot of good information, but it was from a very subjective perspective.
Yeah.
And almost every single week I would go to class and I'd have new questions, because I wasn't just reading the material that was given to us. I was reading, you know, material from other parts. I mean, I used to be a fairly voracious reader. I would go through 3 or 4 books a week, and I just don't have time to do that anymore. And so it's usually 3 or 4 books a month at this point.
Mm.
But I would just go through so much content and so much material, and I was finding that for every single thing that my professors were stating as truths, I would find, 10 or 20 different conflicting perspectives from other paradigms, other belief systems, and even, scientific perspectives, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so I would come back and I'd talk to the professors or the teachers in this institute, and it was almost kind of like a feeling like you're being dismissed, like the little child, like the kid in Sunday school that raises his hand and says, "But what happened to the dinosaurs?" They're like, they're looking through the manual, going, "Oh, dinosaurs. We don't see dinosaurs in here." And I just realized that they didn't know anything more than I knew, and they had no answers. And that's where you step back and you look at their lives and you go, do I really want a life like this? Do I want to be an automaton in a church? No, I don't. For me, that's not authentic. If you want to go and you want to practice somebody else's belief system and practice their dogma, that's great. But what it really has boiled down to over the years is the realization for me personally, and if this works for somebody else, that's great. But the authors of the Bible, it wasn't God. God didn't write the Bible. Himself, human beings wrote the Bible. Human beings voted on which books will be included in the Bible. Human beings have written every single religious scripture or book out there. I mean, there's just to think that it wasn't done that way is, I think it's intellectually dishonest.
Yes.
And you have to lie to yourself in order to say, well, God inspired this person. Well, sure. Then God inspires people around the world to do good and evil all the time, 24/7. So take your pick, go back to personal responsibility. And I think what you find is if you can detach from that and you can read the Bible from a perspective of, or any religious work, from the perspective of an individual's subjective experience.
At that time.
At that time. And whether or not that's...
Because it was very different for you. They didn't know the things we know. They had no idea, given the evidence around them, you could. I mean, I couldn't completely understand it, but you could see there would be some reason, at least, for them to be led that way, because there was very, for a lot of people, it was just surrounded by rocks.
Yeah, certainly.
I'm talking metaphorically. It was just a very rocky landscape. There wasn't, there wasn't trips to the moon, and there wasn't. Telescopes and all the rest of it, and there wasn't computers. So the landscape was very barren. And out of that, you're going to have a very limited outlook, aren't you? I would imagine.
Certainly. And the perspective that I gained from that is this, in the case of Christianity, for example, it stems directly from Judaism, which is part of the Abrahamic religions. And still, you're looking at a microscopic, like a minute percentage of the world's population, and you're seeing a belief system whose meme won.
Yep.
And it won because the people that carried that belief system murdered people that didn't believe it. I mean, seriously, you gotta look at this.
Well, I mean, most religious movements have done that throughout history. Still continue to continue to think that that's the way to do it.
Oh, they're still doing it, and I think the danger there is that I think that we're dangerously close to another dark ages, and individuals are the only ones that could break away, because that's another form of collectivism. That's another form of groupthink. And I'm sorry, I will not become a Muslim. I will not be a Christian. I will not be a Hindu. I will not be a Buddhist. I look at all of those
Stop quoting lyrics from my next album, okay?
So,
seriously,
but I think to be honest.
Okay.
No, let me make this point real quick. I think to be honest, in the case of every single religion, you have the individual's subjective experience. And it could be written in the form of poetry, it could be written in the form of prophecy, it could be written in the form of even history to a degree, but even that's skewed, right? You know, we can go back to the game of telephone in most of these oral traditions. If you can take 20 people in a room and you can mess up a single sentence, tell me about 2,000 years and, you know, how many games of telephone are being played to recount these oral traditions. I just don't buy it. No. But if you go back to the real essence of it, you have man, woman, the universe, subjective experience. And I think to be completely authentic and to have integrity and to have intellectual honesty, you have to go back to shamanism. You have to go back to that earliest experience of stepping out into the unknown, going, I'm here, these are my five senses, these are my perceptions, and I'm trying to make sense of it. And I don't have all the answers. I don't know where I came from. These are the two biggest issues I believe that human beings suffer from. We don't know where we came from. We have no objective, verifiable evidence. One group is going to tell you that God created you. Another group is going to tell you that you evolved out of, you know, molecular tissue that evolved out of a big bang. You know, and I'm going like very extremes here. You know, you got evolution, you got creation. I don't know. I think if we're free to choose things, then why not believe that some advanced aliens, you know, or, you know, advanced life forms from a different galaxy, you know, genetically modified human beings, Zachariah Sitchin. Why not? That makes more sense.
Well, Scientologists believe exactly that, don't they?
Yeah, sure. And I'm not a Scientologist. I don't want to belong to that group either.
No, me neither.
But, you know, if you look at these different perspectives, the only thing that we know is that we come into this world not knowing where we came from, and we leave the world not knowing where we're going.
Yes.
And in between those 2 points, it seems as though we're free to choose a multitude of paths and processes. Now, on top of that, there are also the primordial forms or the archetypes that seem to be guiding our steps. You know, we recognize these forms. When we started this call, we were talking about, you know, people that you wanted to reach and kind of how to position yourself. And the word troubadour evolved. And that's something that I really love. And, you know, I feel as though my work ties into that indirectly. The bardic tradition or the shaman, you know, and it's taking music, which alters brainwave frequencies, which alters emotional state, and it's taking storytelling or language that creates internal representations in our minds that affects our moods, that creates either possibilities or limitations for us, however you want to go. And I think that that's the beautiful part of what you're doing here. And so everything that, you know, to kind of wrap up this the whole religious background question, everything in my life seems as though it's built upon one area or the next, and it's never been a clear-cut answer like, oh, here's the answer for it. This is going to be easy. Go out there and do it. And and when I do coaching with clients, you know, I go back to that same theme. It's not going to be easy. In the moment that you're doing something and it does get easy, you will become bored because it loses its challenge. So how do you constantly, you know, aspire to reach that next level? And at the same time, experience appreciation in that moment. And that's where I'm curious to know about you. How many instruments do you play?
Well, anything that's got strings on it, I can play, because once you have the dexterity. Once you have the dexterity to play the guitar, you just have to find your way around. You know, I have a little mandolin hanging up there. I've got an old banjo somewhere and various guitars, and I can play the bass. You know, the most beautiful instrument to play and write on is the piano. But I taught myself that by just transposing what I knew on the guitar and looking at a piano and going, "Oh, that sounds very much like what the guitar does." And a piano is. I'm more likely to have a happy accident on because I don't really know what I'm doing. So I'll play something and go, wow, that's fantastic. Someone else will tell me that's a B major at plus ninth, major seventh or something, and I'll go, really? It was just this series of notes that sounded great to me. So yes, I can play. John Lennon has this great line, and sometimes I don't even want to credit him. I want to say it's mine because it's so good. He says, I'm an artist. You give me a tuba, I'll get something out of it, you know?
That I love that. I've not heard that before, but I'm not a musician, but I love to make music.
And I'm very much like that. I've got a thing called a reverb, which I bought when I was in, where was I? Singapore or something like that. It's an old Arab instrument. It's got like one string on it and a bow. It's very difficult to play, but I thought to myself, I'll give it to me, and I'll make something of it. You know, I'll make something happen with it. I'll play it one way or another, and I'll make sure it fits where it's supposed to go, and I'll play it. Because that's what I do. I'm an artist. And you give me a reverb or a tuba, and I'll get something out of it. You know. So,
see, I believe that the desire to create is an innate drive that all humans have, and the most basic form, I think, the most biologically basic form is procreation, having children, and I'd say that by default that is how most people participate in the world or participate in the process of creation. Now, I gotta say that I'm similar to you. You know, if I go into a room and there's a piano, I don't think I can walk by it without touching a key. You know, it's just I want to hear it. I have to hear it. There's a drum or something. You know, a guitar. You know, I love to play it. By the way, what kind of guitars do you play? I thought I was hearing a lot of Telecaster in some of the songs.
Yeah, that was my guitar of choice for so many years, the Telecaster, because it had that very sort of biting, wiry sound that you would cut through every other instrument. So they couldn't really turn you down. But it didn't matter. The volume wasn't the thing. It was that bite that it had. You know, just make its way through. So that was always my guitar of choice. Plus, also having played a Les Paul as a young boy, because I had access to one by legal means. But it was just very heavy to wear, you know, for 2 or 3 hours. The weight of it, and the Telecaster was like. Now I have a thing called a reverend guitar. No tie-in with the religious conversation, but it was it's a hollow-bodied Telecaster-styled guitar. So it's very light. It has a hollow body, which is unusual for an electric guitar. But it has Gibson-style pickups, P90s, so therefore has a bit of body to it, which supplements where it's hollow, so makes up for that. So it has this kind of little more body than a Telecaster, but still has that little bite to it, that sting. So that's my guitar at the minute. I love it. But for the last 4 years, I've played nothing but various acoustic guitars because that's what I write on. Well, sorry, that's not true. That I write anywhere, but that's what I accompany myself on. Instruments for me are a means of accompaniment so that I can sing the songs I've written. You know, I may have to play the guitar on songs and work parts out or what have you, but really, it's my friend. It accompanies me while I'm singing and gives me a means to work out how my song should be structured. I don't play it. I don't try to get much out of the guitar itself, other than as an accompaniment to what I'm doing with my voice and with the songs.
That's fascinating. I think most artists when they step back and really objectively examine their process or the process that was used when they created something that they actually appreciate, I believe that they're going to see a series of steps, a certain thing that they went through that resulted in that sort of work. And that's really at the heart of NLP modeling. It's finding out if you did something that works, or if somebody else does something that works, how do you model that?
Right.
And
I have an interesting story for you, if you have a minute, because it ties in with this thing with religion that you said about sort of getting out from under it, and but it also the album I'm writing now is the first one I've written for a long time. That is a collective piece. It is a theme, and it has, like this other album, bookends with the beginning. It's called A Letter to the Times, and it starts with a letter to the times that we're in and going through, to the world in general, if you like. It's a letter to the world, and then it ends with a sort of not a farewell, but a sort of valediction of some kind, at the end. The first time I ever did that, I was only in my 20s, and I was very young. There was still a little bit of a hangover of gods and devils and what have you that, again, frightened me, but I knew it was nonsense, but that didn't stop it from frightening me, And I was as a very young kid, I can remember if anyone told me something that scared me, I would have to go and find out, I always remember living on this like a little slum, and there was a woman at the end, and everyone, because she had dark hair and a cat, she was the witch,
Archetypes.
Yeah, right. So, but she said to me, "Oh, if you drop the ace of spades under a table when you go to pick it up, you'll see the devil." And I was only like 7 or 8, but I couldn't stand that idea. I thought, I can't live the rest of my life. Every time I see an ace of spades, if it hits the floor, I'm in trouble, So I went deliberately, found myself a pack of cards, got the ace of spades, sat at a table, and sat there for a long time trying to pluck up the courage to drop it under the table and then go pick it up, just so I could dismiss it. I knew it wasn't true, but at 7 years old, you can't help but still think, what if she's right, So I did it, picked it up. If there was a devil coming, he had better things to do because he didn't turn up for me. All that was under the table was the ace of spades, right? So that
Al Pacino never showed up.
No. So that anyway. So I've always had that in me, that ability to go, I'm afraid of it and I don't want to be, so I'm going to investigate, So I wrote an album, which I'm sure you'd appreciate. It was called The Saint of Contradiction. And that, with hindsight, what it was we're all a mass of contradictions, and somehow we have to transcend that, And maybe the only way to transcend that is to accept that there are these opposites and let them clash and see what happens. And it came from a simple phrase. Someone had said to me, talking about music, that there was such a thing as blue notes. I said, "Oh, when you say blue note, what do you mean?" They say, "Well, a blue note is if you hit 2 notes, and you can hear a third note that doesn't really exist, but it's created from the 2 that you played." Mm. And I'd use that as a metaphor for everything. Then I just thought, what if everything is like that? That if you took 2 opposites or 2 things and they clashed and created a third thing, what is that third thing? And so I wrote an album called Saint of Contradiction, based on that premise. Mm-hmm. What if all the contradictions were allowed to collide, metaphorically, not out on the battlefield anywhere, but what would the result be? And to me, it was a sense of freedom. Because and I don't want to use indifference in a bland way, but it was almost a sense of indifference in that you were no longer one or the other, but this third thing. So you didn't have to. The struggle would come to an end internally, and maybe if it came to an end internally, it might then help it come to an end externally.
From my perspective, that's enlightenment. I mean, if you look at cognitive dissonance, holding 2 opposing ideas or concepts in your mind, I believe that third does evolve, that third emerges, and that's the freedom. And I think if you look at the heart of Buddhism, that might be one of the messages there, is that throughout your life you're going. Well, this is my perspective on it, but if you look at the metaphor of constantly arriving at various crossroads throughout life, and these are state management crossroads. You've got the opportunity to choose something that is non-beneficial, or the opportunity to choose something that's beneficial. You can do evil, you can do good. I guess the element of enlightenment is that third choice, or that third perspective, where you objectively separate yourself from that experience, and you go, which ultimately is the best decision, which ultimately creates the outcomes that I want. And that's what I think a good coach can help people to do, is to guide them to that environment where they go, oh wow, I actually have the opportunity to not just react to my environment. I've got the opportunity to respond to it and to rehearse and to practice, because
change it.
To change it, to certainly to change it. And I think that someplace in many religions and philosophies that concept exists, but it gets overridden by the dogma.
Yeah.
And
But the conclusion I came to when I finished the album, and this is something I want to touch on with you because I know we spoke about it before we came on air, was the mental state you put yourself in once you embark on a project like that. It's something that troubles me, and I know it happens to others, but so it's always nice to share in case there's anyone listening or watching who may go through an experience like that. Might be some comfort to them to hear that they're not alone going through it. But the conclusion I came to when I finished that collection of songs was that until that third thing is available, the line in the song actually was like, until indifference swells with the free, let the more loving one be me. In other words, until there is a third choice, until I am able to be not indifferent to suffering or anything like that, but indifferent in a very different way, let's just be loving. Let that love be the guiding thing. Mm-hmm. Until we have a better choice, let love be the choice that we more often than not should choose.
Yeah, I believe that's a long-term solution to most of the problems faced by individuals in this world. If you choose, and that's also becoming aware of how much of our ego drives are based off of fear and scarcity. Loss. Yeah. And so just realizing that those are passing, and that really touches to go back to the other two questions you had about the call and starting
I do want to talk about that.
Well, that theme ties into those. It's like if you look at, especially within Start Your Day Right, I can't tell you how many times I've listened to that program myself. And all of my
every day, sir, every day.
That's awesome. Thank you. All of the audios that I've put together come from my own challenges and desire to just be more congruent, to have a better way of managing challenges and shortcomings. And so
I'm going to ask you a question now. Was that a gauntlet you threw? It's a gauntlet you're throwing down there in the call, isn't it? Particularly.
It is, but it's not my gauntlet per se.
No,
I think it's just being a torchbearer. Somebody asked me the other day, about the men's program that I put out there, and I said, look, the message has always been the same. It's just the messenger that changes, and we don't always resonate with the messenger. You may find a messenger that's better for you, or a different one, or you may, maybe you like my tonality, my perspective, and by no means am I a perfect person. I've got plenty of failures and shortcomings, but
your soccer skills, I would imagine.
It's pretty bad these days. So, but the gauntlet it's what I see when you look at the. Have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy?
What's it called?
Idiocracy?
No, you keep naming books and movies that I haven't seen already.
No, okay, well, that's another one.
We should have taken notes before we started this.
No, that's totally fine. It's just kind of some reference points. I highly recommend. The movie is a comedy, but it's also one of those tongue-in-cheek, dark humor sort of things about a hypothetical future. And in this scenario, it's written by Mike Judd, the guy that originally wrote Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah.
He's written quite a few different movies and TV shows and stuff. He's got a very raw and funny perspective on life, and he creates this hypothetical scenario where two average normal people, actually sub-average people, underachievers, are sent into the future, 500 years into the future, in the secret military experiment. And instead of the world becoming a better place, like technology and futurism seems to promote, it's actually declined because the ignorant people, the dumb people, et cetera, are the ones that continue to breed, while the intelligent people look around, they're like, oh, the world's a horrible place. I don't want to bring kids into this world.
Right.
And so their gene pool dies out while you got, like the
Right.
Jerry Springer people, the drama and all that kind of stuff. They're just going
Good
crazy.
intense, great adventure.
Oh, yeah, some degree of that. And so, but I see that kind of that archetype. You can see the same thing with Homer Simpson or the Family Guy, within the Simpsons, where you've got the male figure is just kind of like this bumbling idiot, and I think that's an archetype that's being portrayed to control people. If you look at the average guy, is just trying to go through life, trying not to be overly noticed. I would just put some projections out there for what I see. He's trying to go through life. He's trying to have sex. He's trying to be happy. He's trying to maybe experience a little bit here and there, but it's just kind of like he's diddling life. He's like not really doing much, but just doing just enough to not fail. Not taking any great risks. And obviously, when I say these things, this is coming through my own essence, and this is kind of like I'll put it out there like my shadow, like the things that I don't want to be. Like I don't want to be that Homer Simpson guy. I don't want to be that average guy. I want to go out there and I want to make big things happen. I want to affect people. I want to leave a legacy. I want to create all this stuff. And part of me has to realize that other people are wired differently.
Yeah.
But at the same time, though,
you cannot. But you could never rule out the possibility that you could touch those people with anything, any work like that.
Correct, and I look at the elements that have inspired me, and I constantly go back to Pink Floyd's The Wall. I don't know if you watched that.
I know. Yeah. Now I do know.
Nice.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. You threw me a bone.
I try, but that film is like, it's for me. I love it. I could watch it time and time again. I mean, that's it's one of my favorite albums. I just love Pink Floyd's work. But beyond that, the visual imagery of how people are conditioned, and I constantly remember the child. He's in the classroom, little Pinky, and he's scribbling some notes. And the professor with his tweed jacket comes up and he's like slaps his hand with a ruler and he says, "What do we have here? Notes, secret poems, or something like that." He's like, "No, poems." And he starts to read these lines, and the lines come from. Oh gosh, what does it say? I think the lines come from money, and
okay.
I'm drawing a blank right now, but it's this song that has been sold, I don't know, millions of times. It's like generated massive sums of money. Everybody knows the song. And the teacher is there mocking this child who's writing these lyrics or this poetry that will later become like this, world famous song. And he's like, this is rubbish, laddie. He starts beating him, and that's when they, go into the whole, teacher,
another brick in the wall.
Another brick in the wall, and I just love watching that because I see that so many times in my clients' lives. I see it, I've seen it in my life, in my friends' lives, growing up and being a kid, where you'll have like this little glimpse, like it's, Pink Floyd talks about this again, this that thing that you see out of the corner of your eyes, that brilliance that inspires you, and then the adults come along and they fucking just stomp on that, and beat it to death, and they're just like, there's nothing magical, there's nothing spiritual, there's nothing here, just work and have kids and continue the cycle, and it's just like, no, don't do that. Do something different. Pursue art. Pursue artistic expression. Go out there and fail, because you know what? You can always go work at Fortune 500 corporation if you really have to. If you want to sell your soul, you can go do that. And I'm not saying that people that do that sell their souls, but what I'm saying is that is playing it safe. And I think that if you can go get a job like that and you like to do it, great, do it. But at the moment that you feel as though you're not living up to your potential, then it's that sign that you've got to step out into the unknown. It's kind of like we talked about that earlier, the Fool card of the tarot deck. It's that that image of the person that's kind of carefree, they're stepping over the ledge, and they got that little dog that's nipping at their ankles, saying, you know, danger, danger, you're leaving the known territory, and they're just like, no, I'm going to trust the universe. I'm stepping out there. Everybody else is going to call me the fool.
Yeah.
But along that whole journey, along that pathway, you find that, and this ties back into Joseph Campbell's work, you find that you start to go through the hero's journey process, you answer the call, and the people that you need, the people that can teach you the most, they show up in that moment, and they help you to reach that next level.
I had a conversation with a friend who said exactly that. I had a conversation, and this brings me to a question I was going to talk to you about the call, and particularly about the piece that I'm working on now, which is called A Letter to the Times. And my question is, and the conversation for me should be, that when you take that step, once you've gone, firstly, there's no going back for me. It's almost a necessity that you become unmoored. This is my phrase. You become unmoored, and that you have to decline any safe port of harbour. There's no shelter. Do you know what I mean? There's no. You can't stop off and go, I need a breather. You know, it's full speed ahead. You got to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I find that once you get the heart of darkness, you know, that whole journey up the river, you know, once you get so far, it does become very difficult. And it's something I'm currently, if I'm honest, I'm struggling now. Like I'm right at the heart of writing this piece, and I do feel that struggle is on me. But I have had it before, and so I do know that it passes, and I do know that I can get through it. But for anybody watching or listening, my message is, you know, you're not alone. I've been through it, like you said, you know, many before us have been through it. You've been through it, I know, because I know your work well enough. That doesn't stop that person from feeling the way they're going to feel. And you can tell them, you know, there's some respite at the end, and things will return. As T.S. Eliot says, you'll come back to the same place but recognize it for the first time. You know, there will be that, but it's not going to stop anybody feeling the way they feel there and then.
Yeah, you know, I think in other traditions, the Christian tradition, it's called the dark night of the soul.
Yes.
And it's that rawness and you know, the irony, and I'm sure you've experienced this, but the irony is that every audio program that I've created, I've had to go through that stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do a program about this, and then all shit breaks loose in my life within that context. It's just like, oh, okay, great, you know. And you get to the point where, you know, you start to think about, or I start to think about these concepts, and it's like kind of like you flinch a little bit, like the universe is gonna, oh, you wanna focus on that one? Okay, we'll see how well you can dig yourself out. And so, you know, it's for anybody listening
or watching this, please check out Mike's work. You know, it's not often I recommend anything, and in that field in particular, I'd tread very carefully before I recommended anybody step into somebody's work like that. But in this case, please do. It's been a great help to me and a great comfort and very inspiring. I would recommend it to anybody.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. You know, it's.
If that wasn't the case, I wouldn't be sitting here having the conversation. For those listening, I because of Mike's work and because of the work I'm currently doing, I just thought, wow, this guy gets, you know, he's going to get it, so I'm going to tell him. You know, so I found his website. I already had all the work on my phone and the app, and I went to his website and I got in touch and I said, Michael, you know, this is me. I'm doing this. I get it. You know, it's my phrase. What I always say, I get it, and I know that you get it. And reply.
Yeah. No, we've had some great conversations, and you know, I was seeing this synergy here, and that's really, you know, the whole beauty of, you know, the technology and just the way that things have been evolving is, you know, you and I can have this conversation, you know, a week or so ago, two strangers, but now, you know, connecting over two different continents, and you know, it's a synergy of ideas and inspiration. And I think that I personally believe that every generation is at a critical time. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's like you could go back to older traditions or older cultures where the majority of men would practice what's referred to as martial arts around the world,
Yeah.
because you never know when your lifestyle, your culture, your reality is going to be challenged. Not necessarily in the sense that it needs to evolve or it doesn't, but people will come with force and try to take what you have.
Yeah.
And I think that it's that kind of awareness where you can see most martial artists are some of the least violent people that exist, because they're aware of it. They're aware of, they have a respect for what can be done to the human body and vice versa. But I think that generationally we've been lulled into this kind of this sense that you're going to be taken care of. Somebody else is going to make the important decisions for you. You just need to listen to the experts. And we have experts in government. We have experts in health. We have experts here and there. And it's kind of like Brave New World. You just take your soma, take these pills, and continue on. Don't worry about the course of the world. And I have people that do point that out to me. They're like, well, why do you focus on you focus on negative things? I don't want to read the news. I don't think that's good. I don't feel good when I read the news. And I look at the heart of my work, and it's like reality happens. It's like the Huns, the Moors, the Romans, the Mongols. They've always been at the gate. It's not going to change. And if that's one thing that you can learn from human history, is that one group is always going to try to do something to the other group. And it's never individuals that are, there are individuals in charge, but if every single individual stood up and said, you know what, I don't have a beef with those individuals over there. I don't have a problem with them. If they leave me alone, I will leave them alone. I just want to do my stuff.
Yes. If you look at the current state of play in the world, and I won't be specific, but if you look at it, nobody, have to be specific now. Before the whole kick-off in Iraq, I don't know anybody who was walking around going, you know what, I've got Iraqis on my street, drive me crazy. Let's go sort their country out. Or generally, Iraqis in general, they really bug me, the way they behave and the way they talk and what they believe. And it didn't bother anybody until someone told them it was a problem, And the same with it. And worldwide, you don't know that somebody's the enemy until somebody tells you so. Because they weren't.
And the theme has been the enemies have always been enemies because a person in political power or a place of power has said that those are the enemies. We need to go kill those people. Yeah. It never affects like the common man. It's like the average American, North American, U.S. citizen probably has zero interest in going over to Korea or China or Africa and trying to invade those countries. Yeah. For what reason? And vice versa, the average, Korean, Chinese, African, from whatever country in Africa, they have probably zero interest in trying to come over to the U.S. or to the UK and trying to invade to take something. And I'm not saying that, sure, there are those people, but typically what happens is groups get positioned against other groups. Mm. And it's that loss of individualism in that group. For that person that has a problem with those people. And I think there's a certain degree of respect for individual rights that needs to be happening within that context. Mm-hmm. For example, I don't appreciate trying to be converted by another person's religion. Mm-hmm. I don't personally. I think that's. I don't know if I would say it's morally wrong, but I think it's just distasteful in a way. Yeah. And now, can somebody have their own religion? Perfect. Do it. I think that's great. But if you approach me with your religion and I say, you know what, I'm not really interested in it, we can still be friends. I'm not going to treat you special. I'm not going to go out of my way to overly respect your religion. Because if I see the flaws in it, and the flaws are what I see, and that's the reason why I'm not part of it, I'm going to point those out because that's part of my truth.
Yeah. Well, I'm beginning to, the last year or so, my worry is that in order for any religion to justify its actions, its very being, first of all, but also its actions, it's always going to be able to say, well, you've got your religion, you know. So if you're a member of any religion, and I'm not about to berate anybody that has a religious belief right now. I might do at some point, but if you're part of a religion, in a very small way, you give justification to someone who's part of a different religion who may be acting very badly right now.
Sure.
My answer. Oh, sorry. When I write pieces, I always have this phrase in my head. It's like 5 A's, an attempt at an answer. When I write, sometimes that's what it is. You know, there's no point in me. I do write love songs, and I do write unrequited love songs, and I do write songs about lots of other things. But once in a while, I kind of go, right, this is an attempt at an answer. I've got to do it because I've picked up a lot more information since the last time I made an attempt, and it's time to try again. You know, and at the moment, this is something that is really troubling me because religious fervour has got to the point where it's encroaching very into our lives via the media and everywhere else, and it's brutal. I mean, it's brutal beyond belief. And it seems to me that if you, by belonging to it, I'm treading very carefully here because one, I'm saving the shock stuff for my album, and also it might be a little, you know, incongruous to bring it up at this point. But I wonder if the existence of religion and belonging to any religion gives a little sucker to the people that are belonging to religions that are not necessarily behaving very well.
Can you state that again? I'm not sure if I caught that.
If you belong to any religion, right, anybody that belongs to a different religion that may be at this point in time behaving very badly, they at least have the argument to say, well, you have your religion, and your religion has a history, and your religion has done this. Mm-hmm.
Okay, kind of like the finger pointing blame game.
Yes. Whereas you're not in a religious group, I believe, don't belong to groups. Get out. Go. You know, if you're in a group, get out. We're going to make it a lot easier for all of us. There's less division if you don't have a group, right? But I'm starting to worry that justification for certain religions for the way they behave is easier because they can, let's say, well, you have your religion and look at the way your religion behaves.
Yeah. Well, I think that ties back into the concept of individual rights and the supremacy of the individual over any group. And
yes.
that goes, you know, I believe in a very basic unintrusive form of government where government establishes laws and sees that laws are upheld and protects its citizens.
Yes.
I think that's about as in depth as it needs to get, and most governments are that way. But if you look at that, you know, you could look at the Bill of Rights in the USA, and it provides basic constitutional rights for every U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
And the premise of that is that these rights they don't give special privileges to any group or any individuals. No. Per law, everyone has the same rights. Yeah. But what I think the general trend is that as any country trends towards collectivism, then you see special groups getting special rights, and those rights, if they're given to you by government, then they can be taken away by government, but those rights often supersede the rights of the individual. And you can see that with, you know, the First Amendment, where you know, people have the right to free speech. At what point do you agree with that? If somebody wants to say hate speech, you know, that's a difficult thing, but I will protect anybody's, you know, for me personally, I respect anybody's right to free speech. They can say whatever they want. They can say nasty, vulgar, evil shit about whatever, you know, whatever they want. Yeah. But because I agree with their right to say that does not mean that I agree with what they're saying.
Of course.
But I will protect that right because there might be a day where I might want to say something different.
Yeah.
But that right has been taken away. And I think
Yeah.
that that's what you see within a democratic republic like the U.S. But that's changing, and I think it's
That's a very, 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 that's such an important thing, that people do that, because also, if you even, as you say, when someone's going to say something very spiteful or hateful, the real problem lies with the listener, because if the people saw it for the ridiculous nature of it, if it is spiteful and it is vicious, then people should know well enough to see that and see that that's ridiculous, and they'll end up making a speech to nobody.
Yeah.
That's the only way to solve that problem. You can't stop them saying it. The better way to address it is to educate the people that are listening and go, so that they're so well informed and have so much confidence in their own belief and their own way of looking at the world that this strikes them as way off course.
Certainly, I think that goes back to critical thought, being able to realize that your paradigm is not necessarily shared by everybody else on the planet, and if I would never be for banning a religion. I don't, that holds zero interest for me. I don't think that's necessary because religions are once again another group, and if you look at it from the other side, it's like how do you inspire individuals to think critically? How do you inspire individuals to challenge their paradigms and go, is this really real? Is this my own internal biochemistry and the way that I've been conditioned by my culture? For example, one of the biggest breakthroughs that I had in my early 20s was probably a simple aha moment, but it wasn't necessarily the concept. It was more so how it struck me. It was my physiological response to the mental imagery that I was having. And when I was considering, a major fear for many people is a fear of dying, because it's uncertainty, it's unknown. And if you can take a fear of the unknown and you can put a concept or a context around it and say, if you, for example, within the context of Christianity, according to their belief system, if a person dies that's not a Christian, that person goes to this location or dimension of eternal punishment because they decided to pass up on God's love, which is really, really twisted. But God loves you so much that He will damn you forever.
Hell hath no fury like a God scorned.
Yeah. And so you take that context there, and I remember talking to a girl who was Saudi Arabian in one of my university classes, and she was sharing a little bit about her upbringing and how she would have to go to the mosque and listen to the imam and go through their training courses or classes, Sunday school, Saturday school, I don't know what they call it, but go through that whole process. And I was surprised to hear that they had a similar but different variation of, if a person dies and they're not a follower of Islam or believer in Islam, then they're also sent to hell.
Yeah.
And for her that was a big concern. And my aha moment for that interaction was, I had never once had any fears about going to a Muslim hell.
That's true. Only the Christian one.
Right, just the Christian one. And it's like you could take anybody from their religion and go, do you have any fears of going to these other hells or these other negative afterlives from whatever religion out there or spiritual belief system? And the person will most likely say no.
Wow.
And if they say no, for me, that is a sign that what you're experiencing is a product of your cultural conditioning.
It's very smart.
Because it doesn't exist outside of your cultural paradigm.
Yeah.
It's like, you could take whatever religious icon and, you know, think about, like, does the Christian praying in there are two types of Buddhism, just like there are two types of Christianity. You know, there's the spiritual practice of Jesus Christ, which would be more like a Christist, and then there are people that believe in the religious of Jesus Christ. Buddhism, you know, is a philosophy of self-awareness. But then if you look at the more tropical Asian countries, they've converted Buddhism into a worship of Buddha as an entity, and so, or that incarnation of Buddha. So, you know, you can look at those varying elements, but the average Buddhist is most likely not praying and thinking about Jesus receiving, you know, his prayers or her prayers, just like the average thinking about Buddha answering their prayers. It's just like when you start to play with those different paradigms, you start to realize how much cultural conditioning is occurring, and this is happening in every single aspect of our lives. And I think that's the real beauty of a troubadour or a shaman or a bard, somebody that uses a mixture of music, which is frequencies, and they use language, which creates internal representations. And these internal representations, they can be visual, they can be auditory, they can be kinesthetic, they might even be gustatory or olfactory, you know, if you're really good with your words. But it's creating those mental images, internal imagery that generates our biochemistry. It causes a change in our biochemistry, and we respond to it. And that's the real beauty of art, is how, as an artist, do you cause people to respond by design with your work?
I don't know that any other art form has the ability that music has in a very immediate way to get that response from people. You know, it's because it's I mean, I'm sure someone will argue with me. You can look at this. You can look at a work of art, a painting, and it's always going to be the same work of art. But you can't listen to a piece of music and never hear it the same. You can't. No way. You can't play it the same either. You know, you can't. I can't play the piano once and then play the same song and it sounds the same. It never does. And every time I listen to a piece of music, it never sounds the same. Not mine, anybody's. You know, every time I hear it, something else happens. You know, now, it's a unique quality with music, and of course, it covers every culture, every corner of the world. You know, there's music. People will make music if all they have is some tin cans and a stick. You know, they're going to make music. So it's a privilege to be able to communicate with that in that format, because I see it. You know, I can sit and sing a small intimate gathering and sit there and sing songs that cover a lot of the concerns we've talked about, and some very, you know, matters of the heart and everything. I can just see that it's working. It's really in the room.
I had an insight. I don't know how, you know, I can't say it's profound or anything, but it ties into what you were saying about music. I was watching a Game of Thrones episode the other day. I don't know if you've seen that show.
No, I haven't. No.
But they were talking about, well, they're demonstrating or showing, you know, the scene was a boat. It was a fleet of battleships, you know, and this is like, you know, fantasy kind of world. And so there were these wooden battleships, and they had oarsmen rowing these boats, and they were using a drummer. And the drummer changed his tempo, and, you know, he's like drumming, you know, it's like this aggressive beat. And I had this aha moment, you know, and it was like, it doesn't matter what era, but it seems as though music has always been used within specific contexts. You know, you could look at social gatherings where you have like ballroom dancing, you know, or some sort of formal dancing, there's music. You could look at like a romantic setting, right? If you have the right romantic setting, you're probably going to have some good music with that. But you could look at you could look at the battlefield, and it's also got its own rhythm and beat to it, and it's really fascinating. You know, nowadays, you know, I've heard this. A family member was actually, several family members have been military, and military troops often have headphones on while they're out doing stuff. And for a lot of these, I'll call them kids, but these young men and women, the modern day battlefield is almost like a continuation of a video game for them, where they might have the music going and the gun and et cetera, et cetera. And you know, I'm not saying that's an entirely different topic, but it's very fascinating to think about how music can inspire us. You know, I'll go to the gym, I'll put on music, and my selection of music when I'm at the gym, it's usually electronic, you know, because it's got this constant driving pulse and stuff, or it's rock music. But that's an entirely different sort of music that I want to listen to when I'm doing something that's like even meditating. You know, I'll use brainwave frequency music and I'll put that on. It definitely changes. So the music is powerful, and I think it's one of those things where if we need to be vigilant in terms of what we allow in. I'm not saying, you know, you have to be like superstitious about it, but just vigilant and go, does this music, does this state, does it embody, or does it cause me to embody the emotions and the feelings that I really want to experience, that are ideal for me?
Well, and you know, a lot of music is a lot of people who make music are very wasteful with it, in my opinion. You know, they don't really know what they have at their disposal. You know, it's just using it for very flippant reasons. I find that upsetting. You know, as using it as a means of getting.
Well, this brings me to.
Go on.
This brings me to some questions that I have for you in terms of the future of music. I think that the digital landscape has dramatically changed music. Music's never going to be the same. I don't think it's going to be the same in the sense of the accessibility and perhaps the cheapness of music since Napster. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, you know, DVDs, or not DVDs, CDs were the thing, but even still, we were phasing out of cassettes, and many people still had cassette players in their cars, you know, and it was kind of like that intermediary ground there where, you know, you're transitioning from cassettes to DVDs, and MP3s came along, you know, 5 years later, give or take, and that was just an entirely different landscape where I remember going and buying an album, and I can't tell you the last time that I've purchased an entire album.
No.
I mean, people buy MP3s if they buy them. And so, what do you see coming up? And do you think that we can go back to the days of perhaps buying the album? You know, where a writer, singer-songwriter, you know, a troubadour like yourself, you know, a band. Do you think that they would be on track to try to sell an entire album?
Well, it's interesting because I was worried. I remember releasing my first album on vinyl, and I was so glad to be. I wanted to be on vinyl before it was phased out, you know. And the band I was in the 80s, we actually transversed that change. Our first album was only available on vinyl, and the second album was on CD. And so I got on the vinyl thing just in time.
Yeah.
You know? For me, it's a personal thing. As a kid growing up, to have a vinyl album was a big deal. So I only just made it, you know. And now I'm worrying about the format of the album as a whole piece, because I'm writing an album that is a piece. I don't want it separated, you know. But I think I'm only just going to get there in time again, because I think that's coming to an end too. I think music as a collection of songs as one piece is going to phase out. People now even, and I do it myself because I can buy music digitally, even albums that I love, that I would have bought the whole album, I find myself going back and just picking the ones I like.
Yeah.
And then putting them on, and I can now make a playlist that has that and other songs that are of that ilk or are relevant to that, or can make good company for that song. I can make a playlist, which is a big deal now. And that's my album now, my playlist, you know.
how does the musician continue then in this day and age? I mean, there's if you look at the major challenges, the first one you have, pirating or, file
Yeah.
sharing of albums or
Yeah.
let's say that, as a musician, you write a song and you just do it, you release it as a single. Well,
Yeah.
how many people are going to pay for that? How many people are going to actually find it, assuming that it's some quality work and it's got some appeal to it? And then how do you compete with the powerhouse corporate music?
Right. Well, with the internet, you can compete. Believe it or not,
Yeah.
it's a very slow step-by-step process, but you can get out there, and it's been brilliant for independent artists. And I am an independent artist. I don't want a record deal. I haven't been to see a record company in 30 years. I don't want to. I have no desire. I like it all to come from me, but I'm also one of those people. If someone tells me they found a song of mine, on a free download or on, in a torrent somewhere or illegally available, I'm like, wow, fantastic. That means someone else is getting it.
Yeah.
Someone else is getting it. That's all I'm interested in. And I don't care for the financial payback. I'm not interested. When I make an album, I invest money and time in the album to make the album. I'm not asking people to pay me back. If they buy the album, great. All I'm interested in is it existing.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I don't care. When I say I don't care, I care for the album, but I don't care about the money. I don't care about illegal down. It's just personal point of view. I'm not worried about it. For people, it would be nice because I've worked hard. It would be nice to have some payback because I struggle to get by sometimes. So it'd be nice to get some money. But I'm one of those independent artists, so I like it. I like finding out that someone has discovered my music, and I don't mind how they did that.
So I'm hearing some contradictions in here, but I don't think that we're too far apart. I'm sure that there's a fair amount of my work that's out there on torrents, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I look at it from perhaps a slightly different perspective. It's in terms of money, I want as much money as I can earn or create.
Yeah.
Because I look at it as it's an exchange of value. The more money that comes in, the more value I'm adding to other people. And the more money that comes in, the more I can kind of disseminate my work or make things more quickly because I can bring in other people. I can, get better gear, et cetera, et cetera. It's just kind of like it's been this revolving process over the past, how many years has it been? 7 years, give or take.
Yeah.
And so, where you start out with nothing, and then it starts to gradually come in and come in and come in, and you just keep putting it back into the business, back into the processes.
Yeah.
But I look at the torrent thing, and I go, if I can reach people through torrents, and they're quote unquote stealing my work, great, because those are people that they're either on the fence, and I would not have reached them otherwise. But if they can get my stuff, I have no idea how many of those people like downloaded my songs or my guided imagery work, et cetera, et cetera. And then later came back through and followed me on Twitter, went to my Facebook page, got on my mailing list, bought some of my other work that they couldn't find on the torrent stuff. So I look at it like it's a great tool. It's a great way to get some exposure out there. Now the other side of it is, I think it's that challenge that most artists are faced with, or most creative types, or people that are producing products. It's how do you get compensation? I think that's where you've got to establish that sort of rapport with people. And I think that for you and I, fortunately, we're in very very similar fields in the sense that we're both using music and words, and our approach, our selection of music, or our personal style or branding, it's going to appeal to some people and it's not going to appeal to others. And the people that it does appeal to, I think you're going to have two types. You're going to have the raving fans, and you're going to have the people that are more of the just kind of looking for that next little step or adventure or whatnot. And so it really comes down to that development of the raving fans? You know, how do you just keep
Yeah.
focusing on those people? And I think that the real pathway to do that is to stay true to yourself, and it goes back to that the bigger theme that we've been talking about this whole time. It's stepping out into the unknown,
Yeah.
being willing and not anticipating, but being accepting of the fact that failure is most likely going to happen.
Yeah.
And
Well,
failure is just feedback.
people getting stuff for free or whatever. My personal experience is that you're right, that people will have found me, some people have found me illegally and then come on board, and because the music means that, you know, it's not it's music of value. It's not music as a hobby or a pastime for me to make or to listen to. You know, it's music of value. And so I found that has been enough to get them then to be faithful, if you like. You know,
Sure.
they become. I don't like the word fans, but you know, whatever they are, you know, become friends. I mean, they sign up, they get on board, and then I trust them. You know, I know that the next time I put something out, they'll buy it, they'll pay for it the way that I make it available, which is independently, so they know that they have to come to me to get it. You know.
Yeah.
So it works for me. You know. So yes, I don't have a big issue with people finding my music in any way, and I also know that there are a lot of people, and I've been in that position myself. When Napster was first out and I was struggling financially, sometimes I desperately wanted some music, but I just couldn't afford to buy it.
Mm.
And if I could get it that way, it made a huge difference to my life. I know how much music can make a difference to my life and anyone else's. And if that difference could be made and I had to break a few rules to get it, I would do it. I would do it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't begrudge anybody else doing it if they wanted to get to me that way. You know?
Yeah, you know, I think it ties back into a concept of, I guess, an aspect of conscious capitalism, where you know, being a capitalist isn't all bad, and it isn't all just about the money. It's a way of adding value, and I think also having that flexibility of opening up different avenues for people to really take low risk investments in what you're doing, and realizing that the more people that you can get to sample your work, the more the bigger the funnel is that you know these people are going into, and the outcome, the output from that is going to most likely be positive or trend more positive, just by, you know, sheer numbers. And so with this whole dilemma, I think that the major thing that people need to know is if they are doing piracy, or you know, participating in file sharing, et cetera, that there is that point at which if you don't support that artist, then that artist will most likely go away. And it's the same within any sort of business. For example, if your neighbor makes organic honey, let's say, you know, and he puts his honey out there on a rack. He puts his honey out there on a rack, and people can just come by and, you know, leave some money in the little donation basket, and the people that don't donate, you know, they just take the honey and go. Well, eventually, you know, that farmer's not going to have the goods to, you know, continue making that product, and it'll go away, and everybody's worse off because of that. So the other concept too that I think that we're trending dangerously towards is this constant whittling away of price, where the major goods that people buy, you know, they don't typically become less expensive. They stay the same price, or they increase in price. But the products that individuals are producing, or small companies, you know, trying to be competitive, they're constantly whittling away at their bottom line. And the concept that I'm playing with more and more is, how do you charge more for what you do? Because human beings, tend to do some very they're not very congruent activities. For example, it looks like we might have frozen there.
No, it's back.
Okay. For example, we will tip somebody, like a waiter, 10 or 20%, at least in the States, will tip the waiter 10 or 20%, but you won't pay, your stockbroker, 3%, or you won't want to pay, Billy Franks, $10 for his album that you really enjoy. That kind of incongruency where I think on average we just don't think about it. We don't put it into perspective. We tend to not value the things that bring us pleasure, that bring us joy, and then we overtip or overvalue the things that are really not that significant in our lives.
I get you. I think mine is that I'm talking that really personal experience, and my personal experience is that because people either love my music or they don't like it at all, or they haven't heard it, And because the people that regularly buy my music, and there's a growing number of them, they do. A little anecdote will tell you that I once said that I've got this album and I'm not going to make a CD of it. I'll just make it available only as a download because I've got another album coming soon. And I put it up and I said, I'll tell you what, this time you can choose. It's one of those offers. Oh. I don't know if you can see me, but you've gone.
Yeah, no, I can see you.
Okay.
It seems like we're having some.
I can't see anything, but I'm going to keep talking. And so I did the name your price, and I took more money than I would have done had I set the price at my usual fee for a download.
That's fascinating. What kind of software? What application did you use to name your price?
I just gave a series of PayPal options, or when they got to the PayPal outlet to pay, they could choose.
Did you set a minimum?
No. I had I could record all downloads, so I knew if anyone was, every download was logged, so I knew how many, and nobody paid less than a good few pounds, and some people paid way over the odds. People that have been around for a long time with me paid way more than the album would have cost them had I did it the normal way.
Wow, that's fascinating. It's those kind of social experiments too that I think are really good at actually helping to determine,
I try and log back
how you're valued.
Okay, I'm back on.
I can see you. It seems like we just had some brief little hang-ups there with the internet. But we're probably also reaching some peak usage times too in Europe. So.
All right.
But I think getting pretty close to wrapping up here. It's been a great conversation, and I'd love to have another one.
Yeah, let's do it again.
So what is your next album? It's a letter to the times, and what does it come out?
A letter to the times. Early in the new year, probably I think beginning of February. There is a Pledge Music. If you go to Pledge Music and look for Billy Franks, it's where you can pre-order the album and other exclusives. I'm not plugging. Well, I am a little bit.
No, definitely plug away.
And you can, but also there's a video where I talk about the album, which would save me doing it here. So you can go and watch the video, and if what I have to say about the album intrigues you in any way, then you can decide whether or not you'd like to pledge and pre-order the album, which would be great for me. But come take a look anyway.
I think that's great, and Billy, I like all the stuff that I've heard. It's been great. I spent this whole morning just listening to it, and so it's definitely been good. You got a great sound. I'm a huge fan of that Telecaster sound too, so I've got one of those, and don't play it. Well, listen, don't play it nearly as well as you.
No, I'll teach you. We'll do that next time. While we're talking, I'll teach you some guitar tricks. But thanks for inviting me to do such a thing. I've not done anything like it before, and particularly with someone like yourself and the work that you do, it's been absolutely fascinating. And I was excited long before, and it's been a real thrill to take part in. So I'm so glad that you put it in motion. Thank you.
Well, thank you for taking me up on the offer, and this is something too where I just see the tremendous opportunity that we have as like-minded individuals to share and to cross promote,
Yeah.
talk about what we're doing, because we're all on our own personal development journeys and adventures. And I think the only thing that separates a person who is not and a person who is that intentionality and just choosing to do things different. Like you said, kind of going away from the harbor, getting away from the mooring that's holding you back to your culture and your paradigm, and choosing to go out there and say, I'm out here by myself, alone. And I think that artistic expression in its multitude of forms is the most authentic way to do that, because as you start to create something, what you're creating is most likely not going to be perfect, and there are varying degrees. You could be drawing on a piece of paper with a crayon, you could be making music with a symphony. It doesn't really matter, because it all challenges into your inner depths and to determine what is your purpose, what is your identity, what is your belief system. And once you start to have these kind of questions, I think that's that process of actualization that begins. And it's a process of awakening. And I think that's what we're all here to do. And I think from my perspective, and I think you probably share the same thing, it's to inspire as many people to do that.
I was waiting for you to say that. I was waiting for you to say that. You do hope that, because I know what it's like to be inspired, and it's an honour to think that. And I do get messages, and I'm sure you do too. Oh, you got one from me. It does get to somebody. Someone will pick it up. Someone will get back to you and go, thank you. And I will say, thank you. And also remember that I once was inspired by somebody else.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think that's the way that it works. And to summarize one of my sentiments towards artists and individual work like this is we all live by reviews. It's the positive feedback that helps other people take that. Essentially, it's a little bit of a risk. It's like, am I going to like this song by Billy Franks if I buy it all? Am I going to like this album, or will I be let down? And it's when you do that, when you jump out there and you do that, write the positive review, because I will guarantee you, I've been publishing online for 7 years now, and each one of those positive reviews it adds so many different people that will go out there and take that risk, whereas that one negative review also dissuades thousands of people. And so it's really it's that vulnerability out there where if you like something, you've got to support it. If you like an artist, a business, an individual's work, an author, etc., give that person your money, give that person your positive reviews, because if you don't, that person is going to go away. And that's just the bottom line.
I have another friend called Mike who lives in Philadelphia, and I hope he's listening. And me and him had a great conversation about it. If someone does something well, you should tell them, because otherwise it's wasted. That compliment is wasted unless it's paid. If someone serves me, if a waiter serves me dinner well, I always, and the dinner's well cooked, I go, please go and tell the chef that I really enjoyed it, because otherwise, what's his reward otherwise, apart from his paycheck? His reward is you telling him that he did a good job.
Yeah, it's a huge component of it. It really is.
Never pass it up.
It really is. Billy, it's been a pleasure. I'd love to do another call with you. I think a lot here, and let's do a call before your album goes live.
Okay, mate, that would be great. And again, it really has been fascinating, and a fascinating pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, I'll take care.
You too, brother. Bye bye.
All right.